February 4th, 2025. It was just another ordinary afternoon in the life of Mateu, a 12-year-old boy who had just left school and was walking home as he did almost every day. An ordinary afternoon, an ordinary routine, but this time Mateu didn't make it home. The family, desperate, realized something was wrong when hours went by with no sign of Mateu. Soon the entire community came together, putting up posters and sharing appeals on social media. While the authorities began an investigation, initial mistakes in the search and confusing clues only deepened the mystery. What happened to Mateu? Why did he disappear without a trace? Thus began a chilling case that still echoes loudly. I'm Marcos Campos. Welcome everyone. Just a reminder, we release at least 3 new episodes here every week. Follow me as well at Marcos Campos on Instagram. Scan this QR code to stay updated with everything new on the Marcos Campos channel and Marcos e Fatos. This is my broadcast group, okay? Follow me. Anyway, I announced the news over there because sometimes you don't get notifications here. Stories don't reach everyone, you know? So if you like my work, please support me. Guys, I have a special message. Just a minute of your attention will really help me. If you like my work here on the Marcos Campos channel, I'm kindly going to ask you to vote for our channel for the iBest Award. I'll also leave the link here for you. In fact, I'll leave it in the pinned comment, right? For voting, I'll leave the QR code here so you can access it and vote quickly. It really helps, okay guys? That's it. It's one of the top awards for online content creators. And if you guys can, right? Just 10 seconds, please, to vote for our channel. Man, I would be really grateful, okay? So that's it. Announcements made, let's get to the facts. Mateu Santiago, who was 12 years old, lived with his parents, Mr. Gerardo Ramirez and Mrs. Maria Martinez, and also with 2 siblings. They lived a very ordinary life without any element like that deserves to be pointed out here at this moment. On February 4th, 2025, a Tuesday afternoon, Mateu Santiago left school after an ordinary day and would have to walk home, as he apparently always did. Up to this point, everything was part of his and his family's routine. But on that day, unfortunately, Mateu didn't make it home. And it didn't take long for the boy's family to get really worried because Mateu, according to reports, wasn't in the habit of disappearing without saying anything. He would let his mother know if he was going to be late or if something had happened. Since he didn't do that, didn't get in touch, didn't send a message, didn't make any calls, his parents started to get anxious. First, they tried to talk to Mateu's friends from school, but no one knew about Mateu. No one had been with him at the time of the calls. So the parents' distress kept growing, and as the hours passed and night started to fall, things kept getting worse. And it was exactly when night fell that the police were notified about the boy's disappearance. Immediately then, Mateu's disappearance became public. Many people found out, especially those from the area. An Amber Alert was activated, and with that, official search operations began in different areas of the city of León, which is in the state of Guanajuato, Mexico. Mateu's friends and family didn't waste any time and started, putting up posters and sharing the information. The boy's photo was shared on social media, and they also put up physical posters around the city, all in the hope that someone could give some news about Mateu's whereabouts. But right after the authorities handed out the flyers with the teenager's information, Mateu's parents, according to reports, even tried to warn. In other words, they realized there were mistakes in that missing person alert form. The boy's height and also probably the clothes Mateu was wearing that day were wrong in that information. And these details are very important, right, folks, to help find the boy in the first hours of the search operation. And as we know, those first hours are the most important and also the most tense for those involved. Well, Mateu's parents then thanked at that moment all the people who were there, showing solidarity, ready to help that family that was desperate, looking for their 12-year-old son. Right, guys? They issued a public statement thanking everyone and the investigators. And besides that, they made a request for the public to be careful and not spread gossip or rumors like some stories that said Mateu had already been found. And after that complaint, the authorities also corrected the missing person record, okay? And a few hours later, the alert was updated and reshared. And this is a point that deserves to be highlighted in the sense that, man, it's unfortunate, right, for something like this to happen. Okay, it's that shock, that desperation, right, of wanting to get the investigation going quickly. But man, we're looking for Mateu, right? It needs to have all his perfect characteristics there so that anyone who looks at it can identify him, right? Anyway, speaking specifically here then about this message that Mateu's parents gave, right? For people to avoid gossip and rumors, that's the plain truth. It's unfortunate. Who would do that? Make prank calls or jokes in a situation like this? It really discourages us, right? Regarding the feelings of some people. But fortunately, we know that most people are good, right? Most people are good and get involved, which matters. So guys, besides ordinary people, entities and organizations also mobilized and started participating in the search efforts. Everyone in the city and region was committed to finding Mateu, but there were no clues yet. Some people even went to well-known areas there, in the city and surrounding areas, places known for crime and dumping bodies. They still found nothing. In the meantime, Mateu's mother was posting desperate pleas on social media, begging for her son to come home safe and sound. She had no idea that she was very close to discovering the terrible truth about what had really happened to her beloved 12-year-old son. The investigators began to retrace every step of Mateu with the utmost care at that point. And then the puzzle started to take shape, Their first important clue then came from the security cameras in the area. The investigators went after those spots that could have caught what Mateu did right after leaving school. They recovered the videos. That way, the investigators found out that Mateu left secondary school number 39 in the Las Mandarinas neighborhood around 2:20 in the afternoon. Probably together with some friends there at the exit at the door. From there, then Mateu would have gone on his way. It seems that Mateu was following his route kind of confidently, used to it, Even though it was a relatively empty path, according to what was reported based on these clues. Yes, since there were no witnesses either, right? Because if someone had seen it, I assume they would have told the police. Told them or not, you never know, unfortunately, right? The fact is that when Mateu leaves the school at that moment in the camera analysis, right, of the supposed security there in the area around the school, that's when we have a link that could be very significant, and that closes, the criminal chain in this case. The investigators saw that when he reached an intersection of two streets, Mateu went straight ahead, but right after that, they couldn't track him anymore. It's as if he disappeared from any camera that was filming the area. The authorities were then doing their investigative work, and the family and friends joined together to continue the search. The tireless search for the boy. The family, in fact, was already emotionally exhausted at this point in the investigation. They wanted something that could indicate what might have happened to Mateu. What do you mean? He just vanishes from the cameras. What do you think? Could he have gotten into a car or gone into a house? Because it looks like there's a blind spot there, which was, carefully made. But let's see. Until then, there was a breakthrough in the investigation. New footage from cameras in other places there appeared and showed Mateu. In one of the videos, he appeared walking down the street apparently without a fixed direction. When you go there and come back, anyway, just a boy walking down the street, that doesn't mean he was lost. He could simply have been making his way there just fine. He was walking distractedly until after that moment, he gets to a spot where the camera can catch him, and he stops near a doctor's office. At that moment, Mateu simply disappears. And then we have the cross-check with the first pieces of information with the cameras from another spot on the block. Suddenly, right, when he's not seen anymore after that, it's right there in front of that doctor's office that he vanishes, disappears, gone into thin air. Based on that, at first, it was even considered that Mateu might suddenly be working at that doctor's office part-time. But that theory was quickly ruled out, right? His family dismissed it. He always came home after school. That theory, that hypothesis, didn't make sense actually. Well, with this revelation about his disappearance, what would be the first step? Obviously, contact someone from that office, the doctor who worked there. So the police went to the place, but the doctor whose name was on the sign in front of the office wasn't there. The investigation, however, managed to talk to the doctor's mother who was there. They said it was a police investigation, that there was a missing child, actually a missing teenager who had last been seen nearby. Then he disappears from the camera footage, and the police realize that there are internal circuit cameras in the office. And of course, they request that footage. But the doctor's mother says that the system is broken and that there were no recordings, nothing was working. With this completely frustrating and I would even say convenient news, the police left and the investigation continued. On Friday morning, already on February 7th, the authorities discovered who the doctor was. It was a man named Christian Jaffe, 34 years old. He was the last person then to have seen Mateu alive. In a short time, the police forces went to the doctor's house to arrest him. After all, there was already a certain amount of circumstantial evidence connecting the doctor to the case, right? After all, Mateu disappeared in front of his office, went in there and vanished. The mother said the system isn't working. The doctor is gone when the police arrive. So based on that, they apparently got a preventive arrest warrant. And that was a crucial moment in the investigation, since Dr. Christian, as I just mentioned, was the only suspect up to that point. Okay? We had to be cautious until then, and there's also a self-resolving point here. See if you agree with me. When the doctor realized that the noose was tightening around him, the police had focused the entire investigation on him. What did he do? Clearly desperate, when the police arrived at his house with the arrest warrant, he did something very bizarre and questionable. He shot at himself, if you know what I mean, trying to take his own life, but he didn't succeed and ended up just injured. Dr. Christian's interrogation was enlightening. He was arrested afterward, right? He was treated first because he had significant injuries. He was treated and then he went through interrogation. And at first he tried to divert the focus. But as time went by, with the pressure of the investigation, with all that evidence piling up, he ended up confessing to the crime. And here's a point I'd like to highlight, but with some caution, which is the following. It was speculated. It was mentioned by the sources reporting on the case. Among this accumulated evidence, aside from circumstantial ones like camera footage, right, that on Dr. Christian's cell phone, there were photos of minors, right? Photos like that? Regrettable. I think everyone understood, and after that, things really fell apart for him. If we accept this isn't a rumor and it actually happened, I stress everything relies on the sources. Hey everyone, we're discussing a case from Mexico, and given the history of cases I've covered there, we know that sometimes things are a bit complicated. There are some links you close and then they open up again. So it's the same old story. Where there's smoke, there's fire. So from there, with all this pressure and seeing everything fall apart, the doctor admitted that he abused and murdered Mateu Santiago. He explained how everything happened and even where he had left the boy's body. During the interrogation, information suggested another person might have been involved in the murder as an accomplice. But none of this was clear or confirmed by the police. It seems like just another piece of information from the internet, okay? And with that, the authorities kept investigating this lead without finding any more concrete evidence. Christian's arrest was a major breakthrough, but there were still many doubts about all the details of what had really happened, and whether there was also an accomplice. Or if it was just him, a lone wolf waiting for the right moment, right? To catch the prey that probably, from everything I've reported so far, I keep imagining he must have been watching, right? Did Mateu usually pass by there, or did he take a different route that day? Right. Another thing I wonder about is, did the mother really tell the truth? Were the cameras already broken, or was it part of a cover-up? Well, despite the investigation's success, for Mateu's family, now was the time, the difficult, really tough moment, right, guys, of sadness. 3 days after the disappearance, after all that emotional exhaustion, came the final blow. Any feeling of hope was replaced by painful grief. The prosecutor's office confirmed that Mateu's body was found partially buried in some random field. In that dumping place, there were some biological remains both on the body and at the scene. And the autopsy unfortunately confirmed that he had been abused. The news clearly left everyone in shock with a lot of outrage. And after the family and also the friends said their goodbyes to Mateu at his funeral ceremony, a boy who lived a very peaceful life was just making his way from school to home, as he always did there in León. Guanajuato, in Mexico, had been found lifeless in Jalisco on the 7th. Jalisco is a different region, meaning it occurred in one place and he was dumped elsewhere. So, Mateu's mother and brother posted very touching messages in tribute to the boy on social media. Mateu's brother opened up his heart. He talked about the guilt, right, that he was feeling at that moment, asking his brother to forgive him because he had been a terrible brother, right? He expressed all his feelings there, saying that he hoped one day his brother could see him again and that they could make peace. In other words, the boy was feeling guilty for suddenly not having accompanied his brother that day. But I don't know if he did that, okay? Or if it was really just an emotional, psychological shock there, and he blamed himself because maybe he should have gone to pick up his brother. It's just an inference, but I'm sharing with you all, guys, all the repercussions of the case and clearly the damage that's done to a family, right? Damage that sometimes isn't taken into account, when putting the guy on the spot, right? Who did it? Because not everyone does, okay? I never generalize because there are, yes, good judges who take all of this into consideration when making their ruling. It's a real sadness, right? We need to show compassion and mercy for a family experiencing this. There needs to be restraint at the time of judgment because it doesn't really matter what paths led to this. Understanding a criminal's mind can help protect yourself, but justifying such evil is never acceptable, right? Someone shared a very emblematic message about the case on social media. Take a look. We failed you, Mateu, as a society for not coming together to protect you when you walk the streets. As authorities, for not having an efficient surveillance system, especially in school areas, we failed you. Now, what will come next? Will something be done, or will we allow this to continue? That's the question I ask here 3 times a week, isn't it? After Mateu's farewell, just to leave another important point here about a case like this, guys, which has a direct impact, right? For example, among the school friends, there were reactions from the school, okay? The institution said that it normally offers support to help students deal with this whole situation. All this emotion from losing a friend or schoolmate. Usually, the department and the regional police station provide psychologists to work with the students at this time. Well, the governor of Guanajuato in Mexico, Libia Denise Garcia Munoz, stated that there would be no impunity and that as authorities and as a society, they were united for Mateu and would continue fighting for a safer Guanajuato. Well, after all the tributes to Mateu, we need to get back to the abusive doctor. The person under investigation and the main suspect for this horrible crime was Christian Jaffe, a doctor who, according to some people, seemed to lead a normal life with nothing that would raise suspicion. If he's proven guilty, he'd be the infamous wolf in sheep's clothing, right? The neighbors even said he was the quiet type, He barely talked, just said hi and bye. And that's why when the news of his arrest came out, it was a shock for everyone, right? What do you mean the good doctor is a monster? Remember, at the time of the arrest, the doctor wanted to leave, right? He was hospitalized, and after being released from the hospital, he was then transferred to the Leon Penitentiary Center there in Guanajuato, also under strict custody. The justice system was, at that moment, rubbing its hands together for the trial, right? Here I gave some credit to the justice system. Okay, guys? Because at least I hope that's how it is, right? Because, when you have all the circumstantial evidence, right? But in the first hearings, the authorities presented very solid evidence that connected the doctor to Mateu's murder. Among them were his confession, the supposed photos found on his cell phone, and other details that confirmed he was involved in the crime. And above all, that he was a dangerous person. And this confession thing, just to make a quick parenthesis here, is this will probably be addressed at the trial by Dr. Silva's defense, because how many times have we seen this, right? They'll say that suddenly he was forced by the police to confess, right? But then there has to be a well-prepared prosecution case too, right? And this issue of seeing him as a dangerous person. And if all of this is confirmed, guys, it's hard to accept people who have twisted feelings toward children in society, don't you think? The latest news about the case is from February of this year here. So, as far as I know, everyone is waiting for the trial to set the record straight. To learn if there was an accomplice or if the mother lied or withheld details from police about the camera issue. You remember, right? She said the cameras weren't working and all that. What I thought is that it could really be that this poor mother didn't know anything either. After all, as the neighbor said, the son was a quiet doctor living his life peacefully, but the seed was there, germinating, just waiting for the right moment. And so far, there's no clear motivation for this crime, except for possible sick desires of a man in his early 30s. There's even a report that says Mateu, when he disappears from the security camera footage, seems to have entered the clinic of his own free will. Okay, that says a lot, right? Because the doctor could have already been watching him since he used to walk that way, right? Like I just guessed a moment ago, maybe he was already passing by saying, hi here, good afternoon there, and so on. I wonder if that day when Mateu walked by, he said, hey little boy, can you help me with something real quick here? I'll give you $10. It's a possibility, right? Well, the police found clues at the doctor's office and also at the doctor's house, okay? Which lead us to believe that the boy was taken to one of these places where he was abused and then murdered. And this information also seems conflicting because it's not possible to know where he was actually murdered so far. Okay? Because it could have been there in the office or also at the house or even at the place where he was found, the dumping site, because there were biological materials there, right? Okay? Now, one thing that everyone agrees on in this case is that Mateu is not an isolated case. Guanajuato is the state in Mexico that recorded the highest number of child homicides in 2024. According to the annual report from January to November 2024, at least 2,243 people between the ages of 1 and 17 died from homicide. Of those, 1,787 were males and 456 were females. This survey brings back the main question in criminal cases. What needs to happen for things to change? Crime in Mexico is huge, right, guys? But I would say this applies everywhere. But that's a topic for another time because it's a pretty long one, right? The investigation into the Mateu case is ongoing and there is no confirmed date for the start of the trial. For now, Christian Jaffe is being held in preventive custody by the state. Waiting for his trial, at least that's what's being reported, okay guys? Like I mentioned, the latest news is from February. If anyone from Mexico watching has more info about this case, please comment here and tag me. I'd love to share it. Thanks. The main suspect in Mateu Santiago Ramirez Martinez's murder remains in pretrial detention. It also hasn't been determined for sure how many years he could face in prison for his crime, discussing how long someone could be in prison for this crime. A 12-year-old child abused and then murdered. That question always comes to mind in criminal cases. Do you think harsher sentences work as a deterrent to crime rates? I mean, do you think harsher sentences like punishments, right? that take into account the whole history of the victim, all the pain, the cruelty of the crime, the age difference, the ease with which that crime was committed. Taking all of that into consideration, do you think that punishing appropriately, could that be a mechanism that makes someone think, whoa, better not, right? Or do you think that has nothing to do with it? That it will keep happening, regardless of whether there's life imprisonment, capital punishment, and so on? I really want to know each of your opinions. The therapeutic space is there for us to talk about this, okay? Another thing I want to discuss about Mateu's case is how his disappearance and murder reveal serious problems in the emergency protocols, right? This also happens worldwide, especially when delays occur in recognizing a case's seriousness. It seems, at least in the cases I mention here, that it's the family that has to take action, you know? They have to go out looking for clues, putting up missing person posters until people finally say, hey, let's do something, right? Of course, that's not the norm. I honestly hope it's the exception, right? But in cases like this, with missing people, there can't be any exceptions, right? A strict protocol must be followed in those situations. If the family is saying it's not normal, man, let's take a look. Let's start investigating right away, right? The delay in releasing accurate information and the mess with some of the initial data, they complicate the investigation, which is what happened with Mateu, right? Which, by the way, led a lot of people to criticize the institutions responsible for finding missing people. Anyway, guys, it's a shocking story, isn't it? Of a crime that seems to be random, even though there are also elements that may show there was a predator involved, lurking, waiting to act, right? The exact moment, in other words, a premeditated crime. What is really scary to me is the fact that the child was in the neighborhood walking like she did every day, right? In other words, creating an environment so the predator could study her steps, right? It's a case that makes us question the dangers we face when walking on the streets. You never know who's watching us. We never know if we're safe. The sad feeling is that poor Mateu will just be another name in a statistic. Our sincere condolences to his family and our tribute to his life. I hope that was well expressed in this content here. And of course, that justice is harsh with Mateu's tormentor and he deeply regrets it. Every day for the rest of his life. For what he did to Mateu. Thanks for your company. A kiss from Ruivo. See you next episode.